Welcome, Gil.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Right, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and PowerQuad? Just a quick overview of the company and your background.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Gil Satchell. I'm co-founder of a company called PowerQuad. And we typically help businesses who are struggling to decarbonize or cut their electricity cost. And we do that using a unique software platform we've developed, as well as our own plug and play energy storage system.
Cool. So what got you started with that? What was the kind of inception point for that business?
So I think really I'd been thinking about battery storage for a long time. So both me and the co-founder are electrical engineers. We've been in the power industry pretty much our whole career. So we kind of spot this problem where as more and more renewables were coming onto the grid, we realized there was going to be this big problem because although renewables are absolutely amazing, they're not reliable. You know, sometimes you've got the wind blowing at night time when no one's using electricity at all. Sometimes it's solar in the middle of the day when everyone's sort of at work and the energy usage is down. So we were thinking about different ways we could solve this problem, sort of separately, completely separately. And battery storage was one of the things that I was really keen to explore. So we were actually working in sister companies. So co-founder Paul Cole was technical director of the sister company, and I was working in the main company. And we just happened to be speaking in a corridor one day. And I think Paul came up to me and said, "Oh, I've got this thing I've been thinking about." Started chat about it, and I said, "Oh, that's what I've been thinking about that for the last 3 or 4 years now." So really, we kind of took the idea from there, and that's where it spawned from.
Awesome. I mean, it's such an important part, meeting your co-founder, and bumping into your co-founder in a corridor is the amazing serendipity that often happens with startups like that. And it's when you're not looking for a co-founder, you find one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So where did your kind of career start? Would you say, was it actually in this kind of space, or does it go back? Was it born out of university or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I've always been interested in innovation. You know, even when I was a kid, I was always, tinkering with things, taking them apart, putting them back together. And I was always interested in business as well. So, I'd be the kid selling lemonade at the end of the drive to passers-by in the summer holidays. And I went on to do electrical engineering at university. And as part of that, I took a sandwich year at a large defense company. And that kind of taught me two things, really. It taught me big companies tend to have this really big problem with actually being innovative. Mm-hmm. And it also taught me that big companies tend to be really slow. So although they did actually offer me a job, I kind of realized that's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be somewhere, fast moving, making an impact in the world. So when I graduated, I went straight into a startup. I was working with PaveGen, who have a technology that when you step on it, essentially it creates electricity. So it's all about kind of generating electricity from your footsteps. And I was the first employee there. So I really got this experience where I could get really into the nitty gritty of how to build a company, how to build technology. So that was really, really great. I mean, we went all over the world. I was working in a favela in Rio at one point, where we had the technology powering lights there for the kids playing football. And at one point, I was even on an advert on the London Underground on the tube. So that was pretty cool. And that kind of really got me started in kind of the startup world. And that's actually where I started to think about battery storage. So, it's something I had in my mind for a long, long time.
So what was your position at PaveGen, and how did that come about, out of curiosity?
Yeah, so I joined as, I suppose, a design engineer, facing electrical engineering wise, because that was kind of my background at uni. And the great thing about startups is that it gives you the opportunity to make a really big impact straight away. So I started the first employee, we started to grow the team, and with about six months, I was running the engineering team. So it was kind of my job really there to look at how we progress the product, how we scale quickly, looking at efficiencies of products, things like that. So it was really good to see how that innovation process can be used in a small business. Because it's completely different to how you do things in a big company. The hierarchy is much flatter. You're always giving your employees as much responsibility as they can take. So it was really great to kind of see it from that side. And now, obviously, on the other side of that, I'm able to kind of tap into that to try and not make some of the mistakes we made back in the early days there. I mean, you're always going to make some of them, but it's good to be aware of them.
Yeah, totally. That must have been a really interesting and challenging experience coming fresh out of uni and assuming so much responsibility like that. How did you kind of navigate that job?
Yeah, I mean, it was an odd one. It kind of just felt natural, I suppose. I didn't feel that I was taking on more responsibility than I could cope with, and I think maybe because I was there from so early on, I kind of knew the product inside out, which I think always helps. So yeah.
Awesome. So moving on from PaveGen, how long did you spend with them?
So I was there for around 4 years. So yeah, I kind of went from being first employee to, I think it was about 20, 25, 30 people when I left. And then I moved into a sort of medium-sized engineering consultancy working with power again. So it went kind of renewable energy to more how we actually get power into the grid. Doing some interesting projects, working with battery powered trains, things like that. And then I was there for about a couple of years, and that's where I met Paul.
All right, cool. So you met Paul in the corridor. You'd struck up conversation that led to an exchange of ideas that happened to be the same idea you had. Where did you go from there? What was the next steps, really?
So I think with a lot of these things, things just tend to line up, and that's what happened with us. So we saw the opportunity, and it was sort of the right time for both of us to try something new. So we started up pretty quickly. We got sort of funding quite early on in our journey, which was really useful. So we managed to find that sort of friends and family angel type investor who was able to kind of sit there quietly and give us all the support we needed to grow.
Were they familiar with the industry as well, or was it someone outside of it?
Yeah, so they were familiar with the power industry. Obviously, battery storage being such a new thing was new for them as well. But I think they always kind of believe in what we were trying to create, which gave us the support to kind of move forward.
Yeah. So at this point, you left the previous company. You were truly going it alone. So you've raised a bit of cash. How much runway did that give you?
So that gave us about 18 months, I think.
Okay.
We've been really lucky because both co-founders, we have kind of a really broad and kind of deep knowledge base. So we kind of like getting stuck into all parts of the business, which has meant that we can be really lean, essentially. So yeah, we kind of created our products really from the ground up, engineering wise, as well as the software. So the whole software stack's developed by us. As well as down to kind of PCB level. Cool.
So that's literally a full hardware and software that has been built entirely in house, is it?
Yeah, essentially.
Amazing. So as you started to build it, how long did it take you to kind of get from that idea to holding a prototype in your hand? Can you just kind of walk us through what it's like? I mean, I've never built a hardware product. So the software world where there's a lot of iteration happens and you can get things out quickly and get kind of customer feedback. How does that work with hardware?
Yeah, so it's definitely a slightly longer process with hardware because you just got that process where it has to get manufactured and come back before you can sort of start testing it as a whole system. So yeah, I think it took us around 12 months, something like that, to get to a point where we thought we had something we could launch. And yeah, it's a funny thing. Sort of as we were developing, although the hardware, I suppose, was a little bit longer process to develop, the kind of business was still able to be really flexible. So we actually pivoted in that time from originally starting at looking at residential energy storage, and we pivoted towards businesses because we saw this huge gap in the market where you've got companies who are doing residential, sort of smaller energy storage, and then you've got companies doing huge sort of grid scale, batteries and shipping containers kind of storage. But we kind of saw this gap in the middle where no one was really serving the businesses in between. And it just so happened the technology that we were developing, we kind of realized that was kind of perfect for that situation. So we actually did spend a little bit more time redeveloping that. And I think we sort of launched with the first product, maybe a year and a half, something like that.
Cool. So what's the proposition of that first product? What were you providing, and how did it benefit the businesses you were intending?
Yeah, so it's all about flexibility, really. So the problem is when you have a business, it can be quite a complex arrangement inside. Maybe you're a multi-tenanted building, you don't own the building you're in. So if you're looking at trying to decarbonize or save some electricity cost, it can be complicated. And quite often you don't have a lot of space. So these big systems in shipping containers just don't work. And that's what the businesses were telling us. They were telling us, we've looked there out of the market and that there's nothing there. So what we did is we developed our system to be way more flexible by having smaller units of energy storage, which can be sort of dotted around in a building. And then they all network together via our cloud platform, which then kind of gives the same effect as a much larger bank of energy storage. But it means you can be way more granular with what you're trying to do.
So how are those batteries, where are those batteries getting energy from? Is that kind of solar or the grid? And how is that? How does that end up in the battery, and how is that retrofitted into the building?
Yeah, so we thought it was really important that we had a system that was retrofittable and tried to cause as little amount of disruption as possible. So we designed this kind of plug and play version of energy storage. So you really can just wheel it in, plug it in, and off it goes. So in terms of the energy that goes in, you're always trying to capture either the cheapest energy or the least carbon intensive energy. So that can be from solar, if you're lucky enough to have that on your roof. But also it can be used with grid. So what we did is we developed a bit of software which looks at carbon intensity predictions of the grid. And we're looking at really getting the lowest possible carbon intensity into the unit, and then getting the lowest possible carbon intensity out of the unit. So it's essentially about shifting the way you charge up and then discharge a battery.
Cool. So what's your vision for PowerQuad beyond what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting industry. Things are changing all the time. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to end up going more towards energy as a service. So that's where you're supplying services back to the grid. Maybe you're sharing energy between buildings to get the best kind of solution. And that's where we think it's going to go. And that's what we're working towards. So it's going to be really exciting.
Interesting. So sharing energy between buildings, that's quite interesting. It's almost building a network of buildings. Is that like in a specific geographical area? So here in Milton Keynes, some of the commercial buildings could be sharing stored energy between each other. Is that concept there?
Yeah, quite possibly, as well as sort of sharing energy around buildings slightly differently. So especially when you've got, say, like a multi-tenanted workspace, for example, you'll find that people use energy in a completely different way in different parts of that building. And that's one of the problems with kind of having this big chunky energy storage, is that it can only give energy out or it can take energy in. That's it. There's no kind of flexibility or granularity to it. So what we're trying to do is make energy available where it's needed, and try and add some of that flexibility in there.
Cool. So what is your target market now? You had your initial, remember we discussed before, and you were saying obviously the pandemic has had some impact on your business. How has that shifted your business? Yeah,
sure. I mean, I think the pandemic's been an interesting one for us. I think what it's really done is kind of reinforced how we engage with customers. So I think technology firms have a tendency to say, we've got this one solution, here it is. But what we've realized is actually a lot of these businesses have the kind of ambition to reduce their carbon footprint, maybe to become net zero. They know what sort of technology is about, sort of, but they don't really know how to connect those dots. And that's something that came really apparent during COVID when we were speaking to customers. So we actually developed a new set of software services, so we can kind of lead our customers through that discovery phase all the way to kind of installing the technology. Where would it be deployed best? Making customers understand the value of sustainability. So that's kind of been one of the interesting upshots of the Dynamic for us, actually.
Yeah, interesting. So you were starting out with residential very early on, were you? And then
that's right. Yeah. So we started residential and now say businesses. Target markets are anywhere where you've got this kind of multi-tenanted situation. So it could be workspaces, could be student accommodation, anything along those lines.
Cool. What have you learned about the industry so far, even going back to your time in PaveGen right up until now? Any kind of deep insights? Have you seen this sustainability space kind of grow and diversify? Is there any kind of insights from your experience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's I think one of the things that holds back innovation is bureaucracy and sometimes legislation can actually hinder things that are happening. And I think what we've seen definitely in kind of this space is that government's really starting to understand the value of what energy storage can bring, as well as renewable sustainability. I mean, we had I think last year, it was 40% of our power was provided by renewables, and I think they're aiming for around 50% by the end of this year, which is absolutely incredible. But you've really seen that kind of shift towards getting there in maybe the last two or 3 years. Before that, it was being talked about, but it was more lip service, really. So I think we're starting to see some real change, which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to jump in, actually. So
go for it, Rick.
Yeah, no, just in case of you said about the mistakes. Obviously, we all do make them in personal and business, and I guess, as you said, it's like learning from those mistakes. Was that any ones you can share, and you sort of you did learn some really good things from, or or any funny stories?
So I think the first thing I would say is it's really important to find mentors and advisors. I think when you're kind of going out there alone, you kind of have this little bit of mentality of it's kind of my problem, my burden. I've got to solve this. But obviously, there's tons of people out there who've got way more experience with you, and you've got to understand that and realize that, and find the right mentor. So for me, that was finding someone who was really straight talking, because I think you need to be challenged, yeah, for me, that was kind of one of the key takeaways, was having a great team of advisors. I suppose the other one from sort of back in the day was about team. You've got to find a team that holds your values and shares your values, and you've got to try and understand what is that key value you need in your team members. So it's kind of back in talking about PaveGen days. And now, really, you need to find people who have that kind of self-starting motivation to go out there and do things. And so often, I think maybe with engineers, you've got this issue where it's they're pigeonholed into one specific field, where you need broad-minded people who want to get out there and make change.
What does your team look like now?
So actually, we're pretty small at the moment. So we're still in that kind of super lean phase. So we're pretty small.
What's the next phase for your business? Where are you kind of at?
Yeah, so I think we've got a pretty exciting year coming up. We've got a big pilot project going live with Oxford Innovation, who are a big workspace provider. We've got about 30 sites across the UK. And we're actually integrating there with their 5G systems. So we're starting to look at how can we decarbonize secure energy for 5G, and I think that's going to be a really interesting problem that's going to be coming up over the next few years.
I think there's certainly a lot going on in Milton Keynes around 5G as well. I think Milton Keynes MK Dons Stadium is going to be set up with 5G very, very soon. I don't know whether that's happened already. Is it, guys? Are you?
I'm not sure if it's happened yet, but
no,
I think it's, if not, it's fairly soon.
Yeah, and then I think there's going to be a lot more 5G spread throughout the city in the coming 12 months, I think.
Yeah.
Just one thing to touch on, Gil, it's something that we've talked about before, is this entrepreneurship work-life balance. And I think that's only been made more difficult, not only for entrepreneurs, but for everyone during the pandemic. How have you navigated that? I know, like, family, where you are in your life, one being an employee, even, a first employee with huge responsibility and the kind of time and mental energy that takes up, as well as being where you are now as a founder, and balancing, the strains and difficulties that running a company puts on you, especially as a small team.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's an interesting one. I think when you kind of really enjoy what you're doing, there is a temptation just to work every single hour available. But I think definitely with experience from my early days, that's not the most healthy way, and it's definitely not the most productive way. To be honest, I think I've just been lucky that I've got a really supportive partner. So I've got 2 young kids, which has obviously been difficult, especially, homeschooling at the moment and finding enough time to fit everything in. But I think you've got to think of it as just part of it, I suppose. It's a phase you're gonna have to work through, and you've got to do it to the best of your ability, and come out the other side still sane.
Yeah, that's definitely coming out the other side still sane is definitely the end result you want to achieve for. And
it's a goal.
Yeah, I know. Right, I think us 4 actually, speaking on behalf of yourself as well, Gil, have probably all gone through that kind of stressful time. It's been a lot of work building a company, and seeing it from that inception point and all the kind of hurdles it presents with you and challenges that you have to go at. I think that speaks to actually an important part of finding the right team and finding the right co-founder. For those who are looking for a co-founder, what would you kind of recommend? Like, where would you start in trying to find someone to essentially buddy up with and explore an idea?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I've kind of been lucky that it's everything's fallen in place with us at PowerQuad. I think probably there's so many networking opportunities even now. So I think it's find the network where there's similar interests, people you can speak to, or even LinkedIn. You want to find someone who's passionate about what you're trying to do. So put it out there, and if there's a proactive person who's willing to get involved, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Gil.
Thanks, Gil.